Okay, hi everyone. So today we're looking at domain and range of graphs. And before we start on domain and range, I want to do a little pre-lesson. So I'm going to make this kind of short. So remember that the domain is the x values. So what are the x values, in the range are the y values, right? So remember back, we just got done with inequalities and looking at example 1. Do you see that that's a compound sentence? And remember how we write the compound sentence? So if we were saying that this was the domain, remember we would use x for the domain. So we would say all the numbers that are that are between 2 and 6. Oops, not 6, 7. 7. So remember that we're to the left of 7, so that's why we did less than, and we're to the right of 2. And remember, for reading this backwards, that would be all the numbers greater than 2. So remember, when you're writing a between statement, you'll always have less than or equal to symbols. So when you're writing a between statement, your sentence is always going to be either a less than or or equal to. Less than or less than or equal to. So it should never be greater than, because we always write the smaller number to the left and the bigger number to the right. Okay, so we should know that this is written as x is between 2 and 7. In example 2, isn't that all the solutions to the left of 5? So don't we say all the numbers that are to the left of 5? And notice I didn't put an equal to symbol under it because it had an open circle. What if we had a number line going up and down? So what if we had a number line and we had it from -2 to 4, and this one was an open circle and this one was a closed circle, right? So is it going to freak you out if it's going up and down? So if it's the y-axis, then we would say y, and it's a between statement. So isn't as the lowest it goes is -2, and the highest it goes is 4. So we have the lowest point that it goes and the highest point that it goes. So we can say that all the y values are between -2 and 4. So we write our sentence with the smaller number first. So it went as low as -2 and it went up as high as 4. And let's see, this one has an equal, -2 has an equal to symbol, but this one has an open circle. So it would just be a less than versus a less than an equal to. Right? Are you picking up on that? That this has a solid circle, so that should have an equal to. This is an open circle, so it should just be a less than. So that's all the numbers that are between. So is it going to mess you up if it's also going vertically, a vertical number line? So let's practice that a little bit before we start on what we're starting. So I'm going to highlight all the numbers that are to the right of 1. And I'm going to highlight all the numbers that are between 2 and 6. And let's say that these are both solid, and this was an open. So our domain, remember, are the x values. So the domain are the x values. So this is your domain, your x values. And so how would you write that sentence for the x values? Well, we'd say x, and remember it's all the numbers that are to the right of 1. So we would write all the x values that are greater than 1 with no equal to symbol. And then the y values are the range. So remember, the y values are the range. And the range in this example is between 2 and 4. Another 2 is the lowest it went, and actually 6 is the highest it went. So we use y for range, and we say the highest it went was 6, and the lowest it went was 2. And isn't it a between statement? So let's practice a few of those again. So what if I give you something that is to the left of -1 forever and ever and ever? And what if I give you everything that is forever and ever and ever, right? So I'm shading my arrow. And let's say they are both solid circles. So remember, the domain are your x values, and your range are the y values. So to identify the domain, we would say, we could just use D for domain, and isn't it all the numbers to the left of -1? So wouldn't it be all the numbers that are to the left or equal to -1? And we'll use R for range, and isn't the range above 3? So isn't it above, right, above 3? So everything above 3 forever and ever and ever. So wouldn't we write all the y values that are greater than or equal to 3? So that would be our domain and range for that picture. Let's try another one. What if I shaded the entire number line and then the y values were shaded below 2 forever and ever and ever and ever and ever? And this was an open circle. So the domain, remember, are the x values. So for the domain, we could say, since it's the entire number line, wouldn't we say all real numbers? Now there is a fancy set notation, so we could use this little squiggly set notation. We can use X, and then this little fancy E is element of, and then like this fancy R. That's a fancy way for saying all real numbers. X, remember, is the domain, and this E is element of. And then we're talking about the set of real numbers. So if you don't want to write out the entire word all real numbers, you can use this fancy notation that means the same thing. So it's X is an element of the real numbers, and that's the same thing, right? Because the whole entire number line was shaded. For the range, remember the range are the y values. So the range would be, and isn't it below -2? And it keeps on going, right? So wouldn't we say all the y values that are below, right? Less than is below -2. So anything above would be greater than, correct? And anything below, wouldn't that be less than? When you're talking about the y values, anything above a number is going to be greater than, and anything below a number is going to be less than. And open circle because of... So let's just try a couple more. We'll keep this one short. Okay, so I set up 2 more problems. So you might want to pause these and see if you can do it and identify the domain and range of these pictures. So let's see if you can do it. Pause it and then come back. Okay, so let's see how you did. So for the range, remember the range are the y values, and the y values are the vertical axis. So do you see that the highest it goes is 4 and the lowest it goes is -6? So do you see that we have a compound and statement where we're talking about the y values are between 4 and -6? So we always write the smaller number first, then the larger number, and remember when we're talking about between, it's always less than symbols. And because there's equal to symbols at the end, or solid, there should be equal to. So did you get this for your answer for the range? So you have to always use the y variable for range. And remember, when you're writing a compound sentence, the lowest it goes should always be on the left, and the highest it goes should always be on the right. For the domain, remember the domain are the x values, and the x values is the horizontal axis. And once again, we can see that it went to as furthest to the left was -4, and the furthest to the right was +2. So we have a between statement. So we have to say all the x values, because we're talking about domain, that are between -4 and 2. We always put the furthest to the left, or the smallest number, and we always put the furthest to the right, or the largest number, when we're doing a between statement. And when we're talking about between, it's always either less than or equal to. And since those are open, we're not going to put an equal to symbol in there because it's an open circle. So how did you do? Did you do good? So why don't you stop the video and try the next one? Okay, here we go. For the domain, do you notice that it's not a between statement? We call this, it goes in one direction. So notice the furthest to the left it goes. This is like the starting point. So it starts, it goes from the right of -3. So the shading is to the right of -3. So we have to say all numbers that are greater than or equal to -3. That would be your domain statement. And then the range are your y values. So the range, you have to use the y. So notice it's the entire number line because there were arrows here. So if it's the entire number line, you're going to say all real numbers, or you could say y is an element of the real numbers. And then if you want, you can use the fancy little squiggly set notation. So that's another way of saying all real numbers if you don't want to write it out. Okay, so that was just a precursor. You have to watch the next video before you start your homework.